What's up, guys? It's Wally, and today, with the release of Scarlet and Violet coming just around the corner in a couple months, I think it's time we start to look at the new mechanic terastallizing and what Pokemon can really benefit from a type change. So, here's a list of the top 5 Pokemon that you guys might see terastallizing in Generation 9. So we'll get into the list, but before we do, as always, if you guys are new here or just haven't yet, make sure you guys go down and hit the subscribe button. If you guys do enjoy this video, make sure to drop a like too. But let's get into this list because there are a lot of great potential plays here. So I am going to hide my face camera right here, just so you guys can see everything that's going to be on the screen. But we'll get into the first Pokemon here. Coming in at number 5, we have a Fire-type Sylveon. So this one doesn't give Sylveon protection from a 4x weak move or given an immunity to a weakness, which is why it clocks in here at number 5. But this has an ability to be a great tech in the next game. While removing the fairy typing from Sylveon isn't ideal considering its hidden ability, Pixelate, changes all normal type moves into fairy type moves, it does remove one big weakness that it has, which is Steel. Steel, which is arguably the best typing in Pokemon, bodies fairy types, but has a really hard time standing up to fire types. So this surprising type switch will give you a big advantage if your opponent isn't seeing it coming. Aside from Steel, Sylveon's only other weakness is Poison, which would hit as neutral damage, but having the resistance and strength against Steel is a much more beneficial advantage to have. In terms of moves, a lot of Sylveon do run Mystical Fire, so even though the new move, Terra Blast, would be its main stab move, Mystical Fire would be a great move to use in order to get another stab move, and also to be able to lower your opponent's special attack stat by 1 stage. So having these 2 stab moves on a Pokemon that loses their weakness to Steel sounds like a big win to me, so don't be surprised if you see some Fire Terastallized Sylveon. Coming in at number 4, we have a Ghost, Chansey, or Blissey. So this one may be a bit obscure since Chansey and Blissey both aren't necessarily attackers in any sense, but this is more of a defensive play and does remove their only weakness, which is fighting. So while this Pokemon would end up losing their only immunity to Ghost and gain 2 other weaknesses, you do gain 2 immunities in normal and fighting, and a couple resistances as well. Also, even if you don't see a fighting move go into Chansey or Blissey on that first turn, it is highly unlikely to see a Ghost move, which will be a new weakness, go into them since it's typically an immunity. So you might see a Dark move go into them, which would be unfortunate, which would also obviously turn into a super effective move. But it would still save you from the fighting move, which is what you will see more often, as you would see kind of like with Tyranitar as you saw in the trailer. Also, since fighting moves are usually physical moves, you remove a huge weakness since their defense stats are 5 with Chansey as we see here, and also with 10 as we see with Blissey. So a strategy that you could use with Chansey and or Blissey is that Chansey Shuckle strategy that we saw in Sword and Shield, where Shuckle ends up guard swapping with Chansey to increase its physical defense as well. So, if you do terastallize Chansey or Blissey into Ghost, you could practically kind of guarantee that it survives to receive that guard swap on that first turn. So while this might not be one that you see too often, since Chansey and Blissey, as I said, aren't necessarily attackers, it is an interesting strategy that could make a difference in the next generation. Coming in at number 3, we have a Pure Fire Coalossal. Okay, now bear with me on this one, especially since the trailer showed a Coalossal turn into a typing that's resistant to water. I know that Coalossal retaining its weaknesses isn't necessarily ideal, since water, ground, and fighting aren't really, fun weaknesses to have, but this does allow Coalossal to make water and ground become normal weaknesses, so just 2x, as opposed to the 4x weaknesses that it has right now. In addition, this would also have the damage that Coalossal would take when hit by the Aqua Jet to be able to proc Steam Engine and Weakness Policy, which is actually a huge improvement for the same outcome. May not seem like a huge improvement in theory, but when shown on the battlefield, you'll absolutely see the difference. If you think that's all, you're sorely mistaken, because we haven't even gotten to the fact that Coalossal's fire moves will now have a 2x stab attached to them. So say hello to a 2x stab, weakness policy heat wave against your opponents. And if you add Sun into the mix, you're only adding insult to injury. So while this terastallizing strategy doesn't give Coalossal any surprise factor by replacing a weakness with an immunity or anything like that, this pure attack strategy could be something you see early on in the first series of Generation 9. Coming in at number 2, we have Steel Garchomp. As of right now, I'm not sure if Garchomp is going to be in the base Scarlet Violet game. However, I would imagine that it would enter at some point in the generation, so it makes the list as a potential Steel type here. Now, everyone loves Garchomp, as they should. It was a big part of a lot of our trauma from Generation 4 when we had to face Cynthia's Garchomp at the end of the game. But as with every overpowered Pokemon that we see, like Zacian, there's always a counter strategy to take it down. And we all found out pretty quickly that Ice moves had that 4x effective power. So while Garchomp is no slouch in defense, special defense, in the HP departments, any move that's 4x effective will do some serious damage. So if we can remove that weakness, especially for such a strong Pokemon like Garchomp, it is nothing but positive for us. As we mentioned earlier, Steel is arguably the best typing in the game, and has resistances against Ice and 9 other types, as we see right here. So it only makes sense to turn Garchomp into a Steel type. Also, one of Garchomp's other weaknesses, Fairy, becomes a resisted attack and will take super effective damage against our Steel-type stab moves. In similar fashion to Sylveon with Mystical Fire, Garchomp also has access to some pretty strong Steel moves, including Iron Head, which has the ability to also make the opponent flinch. So if you want to use a stab move on Garchomp that isn't Terra Blast, you can always use Iron Head with the added bonus of the potential flinch, and with Garchomp's speed, you know it has a really good possibility of moving first, thus giving you that chance to really make your opponent flinch. Again, we don't know if Garchomp's in the game, but if it is, I think this could be one of the best. So don't be surprised if you see some Steel Garchomps if and when it is introduced into the game. Coming in at number 1, we have Ground Gyarados. While I do think that Steel Garchomp has a case to be number 1 on this list, we don't know if it's going to be in the game yet. But we do know that Gyarados will be, so that's my main reasoning as to why it's going to be number 1 here. Not the best reasoning, I know, but I'm kind of sticking to my guns here. But there are definitely more reasons behind it, and I think the most appealing thing about making Gyarados a Ground-type Pokemon has to be its ability to change its biggest 4x weakness, which is Electric, into an immunity. This is something very similar to the Ghost-type Tyranitar that we saw in the trailer, just with a different Pokemon. But what makes Gyarados better in my eyes is its ability to change all of its weaknesses into resistances and immunities. Especially for the surprise ability on that first turn, you know? While Gyarados does gain a weakness to water, grass, and ice with the type switch, those aren't typically moves that you're going to see used against you on the first turn that you're going to be terastallized. We already mentioned Electric and how it goes from a 4x to an immunity, but its other weakness, Rock, which is a move that you might actually see on that first turn, actually becomes a resistance. This puts you in the driver's seat after the first turn, and while you might get tripped up if someone calls your Terastallize or hits you with an ice move or something like that, if they make that prediction, they kind of deserve the KO, to be honest with you. But for the most part, you are able to come out and surprise them with your first turn of Terastallize. The other thing that I did forget to mention was its access to moves like Bulldoze and Earthquake. 2 really strong potential stab moves if you do Terastallize into a ground type, including Bulldoze, which does lower the speed of everyone that's hit. So while this, could actually hit your teammate, if you do use Protect or you do use a flying type Pokemon as your partner, you can avoid those issues. And having access to strong stab moves like this, aside from Terra Blast, I think will prove to be a big game changer when deciding how to terastallize your Pokemon. So that is our list. There are a few other Pokemon that I thought could really be interesting with this, but these 5 I think are the ones that I think could make the biggest splash when we come into this next generation. But what do you guys think? Do you guys think this is a good list? Do you guys have any other Pokemon that you would put on here? Let me know down in the comments. But guys, thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you guys did, make sure to go down and drop a like, and we'll see you guys in the next one.